Hello and welcome to the Small Business Briefing. I am Brian Kelly, the CEO of the Small Business Association of Michigan.
And I'm Alexa Kramer, Director of Government Operations. Wanted to do a quick shout out to our sponsor. The Small Business Briefing is sponsored by Marana Group, a data, document, and distribution solutions company. They are located in Kalamazoo. Thank you, as always, to David Roa and his team for their sponsorship.
All right, very good. Well, we're going to start out today's briefing with a very special guest, somebody that will not be a stranger to most of the people in the SBAM family, the Speaker of the House, who is Jason Wentworth. He's from the very middle part of the state, Clare, gateway to the north, and is actually on his way back up there now, pulled over to have a little conversation with us. So first of all, Mr. Speaker, thank you for making time. And I would go ahead and point out as well, as you say hello, that just as a reminder that a couple of years ago, Jason Wentworth was the Small Business Association of Michigan's Legislator of the Year. And naturally, what happens when somebody becomes our Legislator of the Year, they also become elected to Speaker of the House, or at least we certainly prefer it that way. Mr. Speaker, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me, Brian. I appreciate it. Yeah, and I do owe a lot to you guys for helping me get to this position, so thank you.
Well, you're very kind to play along with that. I thought I would start out just with a thank you, and maybe give you some opportunity to expand on one of the major things that has recently happened, which is the tax plan that passed through the House of Representatives. And our members tend to be the pass-through companies, LLCs, partnerships, S corporations, and they pay their business taxes on the personal tax, individual income tax return. And so as there are all these proposals, whether it was the big company tax incentives or the more targeted tax relief, it was the House of Representatives that really has made it a priority, in the Senate as well, in both passing and sending on to the governor a reduction in the rate that small businesses pay on their income. But maybe just give us a little bit of insight in setting that as a priority, why it's a priority for you, and also maybe what you expect to happen from here as it travels on its way to the governor.
Yeah, well, thanks, Brian. I appreciate that, and you highlighting it. The honest answer to that is just the state is in such great, financial position as we continue to recover from the effects of, the COVID-19 and the administration's response to the pandemic. And tax relief, as you know, has always been a priority for our caucus, both for businesses and our families. Late last year, we pushed through a plan that more than doubled the personal property tax exemption. And further PPT changes are on the table, and many bills have been introduced to that end. So we, continue to lead on that issue in the House as House Republicans and working with the Senate. We know that as we, enter into this year in an even better financial position, that you can expect to see another tax cut plan from our caucus as well, that will put, money back into the pockets of our small businesses across the state, because that is also important to us. As families are struggling with the rising of inflation, obviously the gas prices, putting food on the table has gotten harder for a lot of families. And I think it's on us now to provide some tax relief to those families across the state. And we're hopeful the governor will sign it. As you can see, the plan, I think, is reasonable. It is coupled with a debt reduction plan for local governments. So we're really taking a holistic approach to a tax cut, tax reform in this state. And this is the first piece. We're going to see another piece here that will focus on small businesses and corporations in our state, because it's important, as you said. I know, I think it's the SML likes to say corporations don't pay taxes, people do. And so that's just a sure sign of our caucus and how we approach this issue. People pay taxes, and it's interesting to hear my colleagues on this side of the aisle say, we're going to lose this money. Well, we're not going to lose it. It's not our money to lose. It's not that we look at how can we afford this. It's how can we not afford to do this. People of our state deserve this, especially in today's economic climate. So we're in a great financial position to finally be able to do it. And it's exciting to see. I'm hopeful the governor will sign it. Even as we believe she'll veto it, honestly, we're still working behind the scenes to get another tax plan that hopefully she will sign and continue down that path and open that door to the conversation.
Well, in that the willingness to put forward a plan, first of all, and then create this record. Sometimes it's frustrating at an association like ours. Everybody says that they're pro small business, but sometimes these votes come up, and it gives us an opportunity to show when the rubber meets the road, who's really there and to both stand up for and to try to deliver some real results for small business. And I remember just a few years ago, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, we were working through one of the budgets, and it was about $54 to $55 billion, one of that fiscal year budgets for the state. And the budget just proposed being $74 billion. It just shows how much growth, and the idea that some portion of that would be returned back to the taxpayers is eminently reasonable, even if it's portrayed by some as being anything but. And so maybe we, and also thanks for the reminder of the personal property tax cut for small business that your caucus really led on as well. In this idea of, things get vetoed and then they're renegotiated and you can keep on trying. There's actually a recent success story in that too. The recent afflicted business grants that have opened up and people can now apply. We've been sharing this with our members. We'll tell later on in the program a little bit more about that to make sure that everybody who qualifies applies. But that was something that was born in the House of Representatives and passed twice and vetoed. And yet late last year, when there were other incentives that were moving through that the governor wanted, again, it was the House of Representatives that said, hey, as long as you're doing that, we've got this grant program that tries to make up for some portion of what was lost with the state's restrictions on small businesses before. So it really does, that persistence really does pay in your process, doesn't it?
Yeah, and as frustrating as it is for your members, it's also as frustrating for us too, because we come to get things done, and we want to be bipartisan and work together and truly find that common ground. At the end of the day, sometimes that political divisiveness is there, and divided government, you just have to keep going and keep pushing, keep moving. And as things are going to happen, just keep trying to get it in there. I can point to that afflicted business program. I could point to even the unemployment insurance agency shortfall that, making sure businesses are held harmless in the face of the UIA's depleted trust fund due to, frankly, their mistakes. And we want to make sure that is continually brought forth onto the table and that it doesn't go away, even though it's been vetoed, even though it's been, some has been deposited. We're going to keep going after that because, it's not, there's so many resources out there that we can use to help to make the deposit, make it whole. And we just got to keep forcing the hand. And unfortunately, that's just a process we have to go through. As frustrating as for you guys, I appreciate SBAN's advocacy because you're consistent and you're always there at the table and you're always looking for a pathway to get it done. And you can't say that for every association. So I appreciate your leadership on that. It's been phenomenal for us in the House too, to help, under your leadership as well.
Well, thanks so much for pointing that out, and thanks for pulling over and spending a couple of moments with us as you head back northward. So we appreciate you very much, all that you have done. You just heard it there, several examples of the trust fund deposits to ensure that you're not billed for the state's mistakes, and your unemployment insurance premiums, the afflicted business grant program that took multiple tries to get through, the personal property tax relief for commercial personal property tax to double the exemption size there. And then, of course, the most recent thing on the table on its way to the governor is the rate cut in the individual income tax rate that pass-through companies pay. Mr. Speaker, thank you for everything that you do.
Hey, thanks, Brian. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
All right. Well, we got a busy agenda, a lot of things to talk about today, Alexa.
Sure. And I did just want to mention, Brian, the speaker has been so generous with his time with SBAM lately. We were his guests in the House office building. He spent time with our leadership council and now at the small business briefing. So it's really great to be able to work with him and have a really strong partnership with him as a leader. But yes, we do have a very, very long agenda. So let's get into it. First and foremost, some strange bedfellows came together on a proposal to change term limits Now, this is not new. We've heard this quite a bit, and proposals like this come and go. But what does this one do in particular? And do you think that this one has any legs to really move forward?
Yeah, we've heard for a long time, some dissatisfaction and some proposals to maybe change the way the term limits work. Michigan is tied for the most restrictive term limits in the country. A few years back, the state of California actually changed theirs, and they changed it in a way that was pretty creative. Instead of having separate term limits for the House and the Senate, they combined them together, and then so instead of 6 years in the House and 8 years in the Senate, total of 14 years in the legislature, they changed it to say a total of 12 years, House or Senate or a combination thereof, however you want to stack it up, 12 years total. And it allows people to serve, for example, in the House of Representatives all 12 years, or in the Senate all 12 years. And so you get some more institutional stability out of it. And so that model is what's being proposed here. So there is a group, it definitely is a group of strange bedfellows, different political or organizations that are normally political rivals on both sides of the aisle, that have come together and also committed some pretty serious resources toward it too. I think they said they would put up to $5 million to get it on the ballot. And then of course there'd have to be a campaign after that, because this would be a constitutional amendment that would have to be voted on by the people of the state of Michigan. Now, SBAM, at least not in recent years, and maybe I'd have to go back to the 90s to see when it originally passed, if SBAM had a position at that time. This is not something that we would normally get involved in, although because other friends of ours in our association are engaged, we'll take a look and review it, put it through our own process, determine whether or not it's something for us to get involved in. Ultimately, our board would make that decision. But this is something that looks and feels different to me than other proposals that have been made over the years. So I would say this one has some legs, that it's going to get serious consideration. It's probably going to go further into the process than other proposals have, but changing the Constitution is an uphill battle, no matter what the issue or how popular it is. It's a really difficult process to get through. This is the state constitution, not the federal constitution. So it's one that you should expect to hear about quite a bit in the future. And ultimately, I wouldn't be surprised if you had a ballot question in November on this proposal.
I would have to agree with you. And because SBAM, we engage with the legislature from both a policy and a political standpoint too, I think it does at least warrant some sort of review on our end. So stay tuned with that. So now kind of two issues I wanted to cover within this broad umbrella of economic impacts. The first being gas prices hitting a new modern high and still looking to be on the rise. I know over by me here in Plymouth, I just filled up a few days ago, it was at like $3.99. I went to Oxford today, drove up to Oxford, and they were at $4.25. I saw a sign, just really, really high prices. But outside of that, there's also a new study by the Consumers Energy Alliance on the impact of the state's effort to shut down Line 5. So Brian, on both fronts, kind of high gas prices and the dramatic consequences predicted by this study, what does this mean for Michigan? What does it mean for our economy?
Well, gas prices hitting or passing the $4 mark over the weekend is a really big event. And it's one that I think is going to have ripple impacts across the board. It will be interesting to watch and see whether or not the Federal Reserve changes their interest rate increase schedule based on such a dramatic and steep increase in gasoline prices. And so we saw, according to AAA, the national average on Sunday hit 401 and $4.009. So basically $4.01 per gallon, but then another big jump today. And so it has a lot to do with what's happening around the globe, but it's really been a series of cascading events that have led to this. So we saw in literally the first weeks of the Biden administration, an executive order to to stop granting new leases on federal lands and waters for oil exploration. So on the supply side has been kind of constricted for the last year. And then on top of that, having the one of the major players on the global oil market, Russia, being the entire process being disrupted by the conflict, the war between Russia and Ukraine, has definitely changed things for the worse. Now, I've seen it reported a lot, like the United States doesn't buy much from Russia, therefore it shouldn't matter much. But that's not how commodities work. These are global markets, and so when one of the players, the supply from one of the players, becomes either less certain, or in the case of Russia, because of sanctions and different changes around the world, then it puts pressure on other sources, more pressure on other sources, including those that we buy from. This stuff is all connected. So it's not like you can say, well, we don't buy much from Russia, therefore no big deal. It is a bit disappointing that, at least in terms of the long term, that our federal government hasn't made a pivot already to address this. I think before all is said and done, that the political pressure might catch up with them, and they will look to more domestic production of our energy, and to essentially open up more of the lands for leases for exploration. I did hear the White House say that, well, there are already these leases out there and the oil companies could just go out and get it. It's not really how it works. Some of them are already spent, and others are, they don't just go and drill anywhere. They have to have reason to believe that there are resources to go get, and then they have to be able to get that from wherever it's taken to refineries. And so when they make the decisions to constrict the front end of the supply, it has an impact all the way through. So big and dramatic changes on the world market. It's not going to get better anytime soon. I wouldn't be surprised if you saw the Federal Reserve adjust some of their decisions on interest rates, because if they're worried about the economy overheating, nothing will cool it down like sustained high energy prices. And so now they haven't said anything about that yet. This is just my speculation at this point, but it's difficult for me to imagine them being as aggressive as some of the posturing. Interest rates are going up, but in terms of are they really going to go as far as they originally planned to curtail inflation when energy prices might dampen the growth, and that's upon us already. So the Consumers Energy Alliance is a group that SBAM has had some involvement over the last few years with. And this is a group that is looking at the impact, or has looked at the impact, of what would happen if the governor and the attorney general's efforts to close down Line 5, which is a light crude pipeline that carries propane and oil to be refined into gasoline through Michigan. And so there's been efforts to shut that down. We had in the past supported an alternative to that, which was putting the pipeline in a tunnel underneath the Straits of Mackinac, not in the lake bed, but take it out of the lake bed and put it 100 feet below the lake bed and through solid bedrock in a dry tunnel, and take away any risk of like an anchor strike or something like that going wrong. And so the governor and the attorney general have both sought to close it down. That started in 2019. 2020 went to federal court. Things on the legal front have not been going well for them. I don't think that they have the ability legally to close it down. But the Consumers Energy Alliance had put together a report that showed what the impact would be overall in the Midwest, and then here in Michigan. So in Michigan, families and businesses would spend a total of 1.8 to 2.2 billion a year more on gasoline and diesel if Line 5 were shut down, as our state has tried to do in recent years. The Midwest region which is Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, and Pennsylvania, the Midwest and the region of the study, would be closer to $6 billion in additional costs. So this really does have a major impact. About 55% of the propane for our state also is transported through this pipeline, and for the UP, it's an even higher proportion. Now you might ask, well, wouldn't they just do something else? What if they took the pipeline down? What are the alternatives? It would take 90 tanker trucks per hour, 90 per hour, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, in order to transport the same amount to the refineries. It's not even possible. I mean, there's already a shortage of truck drivers, and it's not feasible. I only give that example as to get the scale of what we're talking about here. So it's common sense that it would make a bad problem a lot worse. But it really is time for the attorney. The governor already pulled the federal lawsuit. It was headed toward a loss in federal court, so they pulled the lawsuit to avoid the federal loss. There's this countersuit though that by Enbridge, and it looks like they look like they're headed for a win in the countersuit against the state. But in the state court, the attorney general is still pushing this lawsuit, and in the face of what we have today, it just seems so untenable. The concept of still advocating to close down this pipeline that would have such a detrimental impact on overall costs here in Michigan. So sooner or later, it will get resolved in the courts, either by the politicians wising up and putting the security interests of our state and our country first, or they'll just lose in court. And I think it's generally a foregone conclusion that they will lose in court, because the law isn't on the side of closing down the pipeline.
Thanks for that, Brian. That was a really interesting study. And on the gas prices front, I think every time that I talk to my brother who drives a pickup truck, he's always talking to me about the gas prices. And he's like, Alexa, what are you doing to fix it? I'm like, Matt, I have no control over those, but I'm doing my best. One item that we did talk to the speaker about briefly was the Afflicted Business Grant, newly kind of changed the name to Growing My Business Grant Program. And so these are grants for businesses to take advantage of, and think really targeted towards those businesses that were shut down during the pandemic. And so this grant opened up on March 1st and will be going through the full month of March, closing at midnight on March 31st. And so what Treasury did is they did their best to kind of categorize the businesses that were most hurt by the pandemic. And there's 9 categories that they came up with. So you would go to michigan.gov/ABR, standing for Apply for Business Resources, so ABR. To go ahead and apply for this, you would need to input your decline in sales and show that decline in sales between 2019 and 2020. And then there would be a calculation based on your financial hardship for this grant award that you would be eligible for. A few things that I do want to note. The first being to read those categories carefully. Treasury did build into a few of the 9 specific categories this other option. So for example, if you are a business that relies on concert venues being open, then you would be able to hit that other button and make your case for why your business wasn't able to be open or operate like it normally would because of concert venues being shut down. So that's just an example. So be very careful about reading those categories and make sure not to lose sight of that other category that kind of is the catch-all for a lot of businesses. Another thing is that this is not a first come, first serve. So you do not need to hurry up and fill out your paperwork really quickly to get that application in. This will be open through the month of March, and then they will make the grant determinations based upon how many folks have applied for the grants as well. So just something that I wanted to keep in the back of your mind. We've been talking about this grant program for businesses. We've been sharing it out, but wanted to share it out with our members one more time. If you have any questions about that grant, please feel free to reach out to me. I've been serving as that liaison between the Department of Treasury and our members to keep them updated and help them out with the application. So feel free to reach out to me with any issues or questions that you might have. Last but certainly not least, it is Data Monday. So before we close out here, I want to turn back over to Brian to give us kind of an outlook of what's going on out there.
All right, so we've made I would say, kind of a style change here, that things have changed in over the last few weeks, and especially month, and so we are going to finish with the data instead of start with the data to reflect on things going much better. So we have here just a heat map for the state. And you'll see that Michigan is a pretty light color here, as is a lot of the country. Idaho happens to be the highest rate in the country right now. So you see that that they're kind of later in their overall process. Here's what the country's spike looks like, and it's back down, actually starting to get back down to summer looking numbers, and that's it's a good sign. It's not unexpected. We saw this happen in other countries after Omicron. Here's looking at all the different regions of the state, and they are all down. So all 4 regions of the country, are down pretty low now, these numbers. This is unusual. That's why in a lot of ways, why this wave feels different than those before, is because before, the country in some places were going up and some places were going down. And so it's kind of a mixed picture across the board. In this case, they went up fairly in uniform and went down and are all together down across the entire country. So that's different. That is a distinction between previous waves, and perhaps a sign that we're heading toward endemic phase rather than pandemic phase. So looking at ICUs and hospitals around the country, same looking type of a trend, coming down quite a bit. The this number here, this hospitalization number, remember, hospitalized with COVID as opposed to hospitalized because of COVID. We don't have a good way of sorting that out. So I think that to get an idea of how the wave compares, the ICU might be a little bit better, but even with ICU, doesn't necessarily mean you're in the ICU because of COVID. It means you're in the ICU with COVID. So it's a little frustrating, but again, nice to see it down anyway. Here's Michigan's numbers, and Michigan had that slow, gradual increase, and then the spike up with Omicron, and then it has come down. Is almost as steeply as the national numbers, and starting to look like kind of late summer numbers that we've experienced in the last couple of years, that type of a range. So great to be like that in the winter time. So we'll see how long it lasts, but pretty good sign. And then looking at hospitalization and ICU, you see that really coming down quite a bit. And this part here where you see this kind of dip down in this most recent wave, I think this is just because our Delta wave and our Omicron wave were so close together that a lot of that rise was Delta, and Delta started to come down and Omicron took it right back up. But nevertheless, coming down so steeply now that I'm feeling very confident, and I'm also confident that that this trend away from rules is going to continue. So actually at SBAM, we took down our signs as an example. There've been signs up for a long time recommending masking and things. And as you see, those are starting to kind of disappear from across the landscape. Even the most restrictive places in the country are dropping the remainder of their restrictions. And so there's I think there's growing confidence. I thought it was kind of funny over the late last week that Governor DeSantis in Florida had joked that Dr. Fauci was in witness protection program, because you don't really see him around anymore. He used to be a regular on the talk shows, and but even the Biden administration is really trying to project something very, very different than how they were talking just 6 weeks ago. And they're taking a cue from the American people. that they're ready to manage their own risk and move on as they see fit. And I think the fact that that Dr. Fauci used to be kind of front and center, really has disappeared from the public scene in the same type of a way, is yet another sign that our federal government has finally gotten to the point where they're ready to move on.
Well, with that, we are at time. So I will miss you guys on Thursday, but Brian and Sarah will be back to take over her rightful place on a small business briefing. Until next time, though, we'll see you.
Thanks, everybody. See you on Thursday.